Bill, welcome to our podcast. Thank you very much for taking the time to do
Hey,
this.
Tom.
Um, so, what we're going to do is, I'd like to just have a nice conversation about leadership and about your experiences with it in a variety of ways. Um, so, maybe if we could start with something really simple, such
Okay.
as when you think of a leader who's impacted you sometime in your life, who comes to mind and why?
A few come to mind, but one head and shoulders above the rest is individual named Dennis. Comes to mind right away. I've known Dennis for coming up on 40 years. Hard to believe. We worked together at our first major business out of college. We were peers. At times, I reported to him. And we've stayed in touch over the years, and where he really impacted me was early on in the way that he did things in his thought processes. But more recently, we did a startup about in 2003, and Dennis was hired by a couple of the owners to come in and run their business. They thought they had a good idea, but they felt they had no real way to manage it.
Hmm.
They brought Dennis in, and it really showed me what he could do in terms of taking a startup, which, as you know, may or may not make it. You don't know. And by having a following, a group of people that he had impacted over the years, he was able to get on the phone and bring the right people in and and get us started to in a situation where we grew rapidly, we were profitable, we were eventually acquired. And it's because Dennis has that following and people want to come and work for him that we were able to do it. And he never sugarcoated it. I remember with me, he said, look, we think this is a good idea. We think this can work. We think we're sort of well funded, but it's a startup. It may or may not work. I want you to know that before you say yes.
Hmm.
And so he did that, and that's we're coming up on what 19 years since of that. And I don't work with him now, but the phone rang and it was Dennis and said, I have this, I need help, I'd be saying, what do you need me to do?
Hmm. So I think that the quality that I hear there is transparency, directness, honesty.
Very much so. And in fact, I learned early in business that one of the most important skills you can have, or traits, if you will, is know when to keep your mouth shut. In other words, you're going to hear things and know things that in your job that aren't intended for everybody,
Hmm.
that are confidential and so on. And so, what Dennis taught us related to that, me and others, is he'd say, if you ask, you can ask me anything you want, but if I'm not going to tell you I don't know, if the real answer is I can't say.
Right.
So he wanted to play straight. And there were times you'd ask him a question, he'd say, "I'm sorry, I just can't talk about with you right now." And I much prefer that to I don't know, or making up some other scenario that it's not real. That,
Hmm.
like you said, the honesty part. He'd talk to you about anything, but he'd play it straight in terms of whether what he could or couldn't say. And I appreciate that. And I learned that as my positions increased in importance. You're going to know things. You got to keep your mouth shut. And that's one thing that I learned from him that I felt was very valuable.
Hmm. When you think of Dennis as a leader, in addition to his transparency, his ability to be honest with you, did he have any other qualities that that you feel really impacted you as a leader?
Yeah, one that he had several, but one that comes to mind right away is decision making, which in a large part I feel is maybe the most important, or one of the most important characteristics for any leader. But Dennis isn't afraid to make the tough call. By the same token, he's not a knee jerk reaction kind of guy. He's
Hmm.
likes it to be fact based to the extent it can, and likes to give everybody an opportunity. When he goes into a new company, show me what you can do. But by the same token, he's not going to wait He's not going to wait long periods of time to make a move if a move needs to be made. So deciding what to do. And for a lot of people, that's very hard, but deciding what to do and then making it happen. And,
Hmm.
and I think, you know, especially in today's business, there's not a lot of time for sitting around and, overthinking things. But if you do that, the next guy is going to be in there before you know it. So,
Hmm. Oh,
uh,
absolutely.
so decision making, I think, is just critical here, and something that he's great at.
Okay. So, um, in your last couple of positions, you were a senior executive in the companies you were working with. So, in that capacity, you were serving as a leader. What do you believe you brought to the leadership table when you were leading others? So let's turn the focus on to Bill here for a
Okay.
second.
Yeah. Okay. We can do that. Yeah, I had some senior level management roles, and at times I had other managers or directors reporting to me, sometimes people at other levels. I think what they would say, Tom, if you talk to some of them, I think what they would say is, uh, Bill's consistent. I know what I'm going to get from him. I can go to him anytime, any day, and bring a problem. If there's a problem, I know he wants to know about it right away. Don't try to hide it. Don't try to make it something that it's not. Bring it to him, and
Hmm.
he's going to be on an even keel, consistent, and not the sky is falling unless it really is, but it rarely is. And I think that's one of the things they'd say is Bill's consistent. I know what I'm going to get. I know he's going to look out for me and help me develop in my career. I would hope they would say that, and I think they would,
Hmm.
because in those roles, that's one of the most important parts of that role. I mean, if you saw it in the job description, it probably doesn't say it, but developing the next group of people, whether it's your replacement or just helping people develop, is oftentimes overlooked, but is a critical role. And I think they would say that I'm pretty good at that.
Hmm. So if you'll stay on that for just a second, I'd like to learn a little bit more about how do you go about that process of helping somebody build their skills, enhance their own career.
Well, I like to start, first of all, by trying to understand where they are in their life and their career. In other words, some people are very content in what they're doing. They do it
Hmm.
well, or maybe even excellent. And they don't want to be talking about what they have to do to be promoted or to get the next opportunity. And that's okay. I think some leaders want everybody to be go getters and to be out there wanting to become president of the company. And to me, that's just not real. So I want to understand where people are and what they'd like to be doing. And it may be outside of the areas I was managing. It could be, or it could be the types of areas that I'm working with. So I would want to understand what they're doing, and then coach them through that over time. I mean, nobody likes to wait, especially nowadays. If you tell a younger person this is sort of a 2-year plan to get you to the director level,
Hmm.
they want the 3-month plan, but those don't always exist. So helping, understanding what they want and helping them uh, to get there. And I remember a situation where I had, this was about the second major job of my career. I had a person working for me. Her name was Cheryl, and she had a mixed bag of a job, a number of different responsibilities, and she did a good job.
Hmm.
And something I learned from my boss at the time is we did performance evaluations every 6 months or year or whatever. And I wrote, my first performance evaluation, and my boss, who was the president of the company, had to review it and sign off on it. And what he said to me has stuck with me ever since. He said, Cheryl is a good worker, good employee. He said, but you owe it to her to point out areas where she can focus, where she can improve, that will help her to get to another level, which I knew she wanted to. And that's stuck with me ever since, especially in coaching or in performance evaluations, right? There's something that everybody can work on.
Hmm.
There's something that LeBron James can work on. There's something that certainly that I could work on and they could work on. And you do owe it to those people to point those things out and to talk about them. And they may agree, they may disagree. That's a different point. But to point out what they can do to enhance their resume, if you will, or to prepare themselves for an opportunity that they'd like to have. And this really comes into play, Tom, when somebody's really wanted some opportunity that's opened up and they don't get it. You need, for whatever reason, you need to be able to talk to them about maybe why they didn't and what they need to do to be positioned well the next time a job like that rolls around.
Hmm. And, and when you think about that communication style, that ability that you have then of talking with them about a difficult topic, for example, um, when you look at your own communication skills, is there anything that stands out that you feel has been valuable for you in that respect?
So in talking to somebody maybe on a difficult situation,
Yes. Yeah.
um, yeah, I think the situation is most difficult if you haven't been talking to the person along the path. If all of a sudden you bring them into your office one day and say, "Oh, we got a serious problem. We've got to deal with it," when you've known about it for a while and you just
Hmm.
haven't touched upon it with them, haven't eased into it. If that happens, you've created a problem for yourself. So I would try to, I would, and these things aren't easy. I'm not saying they are, but the best thing is if you notice an issue, a concern, maybe even what you'll see sometimes is it appears the person's, either their dedication or their interest in the job has changed. They're just something isn't the same and they're not achieving like they normally do.
Hmm.
Start talking about it early on. And if to the extent you can have metrics, key performance indicators to talk and to be have it less of a subjective thing and more objective,
Hmm.
that'll help you every time. But you start having the conversation before it becomes a big problem. That would be my number one recommendation on that. And I think overall I've done a pretty good job of that over the years. You never want, I guess the ultimate scenario is when you bring somebody in and maybe you have to let them go, you don't want them to be surprised by that or to be the first time they've heard, "Oh, I didn't know this was an issue." You never want to be in that place.
Yeah, certainly not. That makes for an even more difficult, conflicted conversation. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So in your career, you've been both at the bottom and the middle, and you've also been in senior positions. So when you think about what people below you in an organizational hierarchy need from a leader, sort of in general, what so when you're looking up, what is it that you believe that most people who are looking up the hierarchy need from their leaders?
So looking up, for first thing I would say is it changes over time. So when I
Okay.
was when I was new into a position or others are new, I think they need to look up for a lot of things: knowledge, guidance, just general how things are going. What should I be doing? I've gotten this new job and I'm showing up. What am I supposed to do?
Hmm.
When I just because I reflect on my first job right out of college, I was an accounting major. I've never done any accounting. I was brought into a company into a management role, and I didn't know what I was supposed to do, but I had some good leaders that would proactively, "Hey, Bill, how are things going? What do
Hmm.
you need from me?" And at the same time, I knew I could go to them. Oh, as your career progresses, sometimes you just need less of that. I mean, not everybody needs the same level of attention or the same level coaching, mentoring, and management as
Right.
everybody else. So over time, what I needed was more of a bigger picture direction of what we're trying to accomplish. And certainly, if the board or a CEO or somebody had a metric we had to achieve, we would want to know that, but didn't need nearly as much guidance. It was more of a, here's what we need to do. We need you to make sure this happens. And what Dennis and others would always say, report shortfalls early.
Hmm.
If you know you're not going to hit a date for some deliverable, don't wait till that date and just not do it. Start, and that's all about communication, and that's all about just conversation, keeping people educated on where things are going.
Hmm.
So a long-winded answer, but I think it varies greatly for myself and others depending on where they are in their career and how long they've been in a role. My when I liked it the best was when my boss would talk to me, every few weeks and say, "Everything going okay?" And I'd say, "I got it. It's fine." That's what I personally like the best.
Okay.
But knowing if I needed something, that they'd have my back, that was important too.
Hmm. So you've been spending some time talking about um, how you can help um, a direct report, for example, improve their performance and grow in their position, advance in their careers. When you think about people who are reporting to you as leaders or potential leaders, what what suggestions do you have for them about how to improve their abilities as leaders?
Yeah, it's a good question. If they're let's say I have a person who has wanted to manage, and I move them
Okay.
into a role where or I start to prepare them for a role where that would be the case, and look to move them into that role.
Hmm.
I like to start talking to them about, you know, getting their views, because I don't want it to always be me inflicting my views on them. I want to hear what they think and what their, you know, you'll see this in the interview scenarios now, Tom. A lot will be, what's your first 10 days plan, your first 30 days, your first 60, your first 90. What are you going to be doing?
Hmm.
It's not all that different on an internal promotion or somebody you're mentoring that's going to go into a new job. You need to talk to them about, what it is you want to see them doing. And it's so easy for them to, get caught in the weeds of details of things they've been doing, and not to, know what to do relative to managing people and building a team. And so really have to carve time out for that, because otherwise
Hmm.
the person doesn't get the help that they need, uh, to develop and to be comfortable in a new role. I've seen it a lot of times where I promote person A to run a group of 5 or 6 people. Well, probably three of the other 5 or 6 people think they should have gotten the job,
Hmm.
and they're not sure why person A, and a guy who worked for me who was great. His name was Jason. Why did Jason get this role? And after a while, they saw why Jason got the role, because he could handle it, he could do it, but I had to help him with it. And some, just like something I commented on a little while ago, some new managers are knocking on your door, Bill, I need help.
Hmm.
What should I do here? What do you think? And of course, I'd try to manage it in terms of, okay, Jason, well, what's the situation? What have you done? What have you looked at? What are you recommending? What do you think we should do? And then help them along that way.
Hmm.
Then I've had other people, same scenario, who, if I don't go track them down and see how they're doing and what the issues are, I'm never going to know. These guys are just come to work, they, head down. They don't need a lot of interaction. So, it comes to this point where you'll see in books and, in conversation, do you treat everybody the same? Do you treat everybody equally?
Hmm.
And the fact is, you don't. I mean, everybody treated fairly, absolutely, but everybody treated the same and managed the same, Absolutely not. I mean, they'll call it at times situational management. I mean, you can have a few, maybe 5 or 6 managers, all who have 4 or 5 people, but
Hmm.
their life experience, their tenure, their skills are all different, and you've got to work with them individually and differently.
So that's a really interesting point. When you're when you're treating when you're helping people develop differently because their backgrounds, their skill sets, their experiences are all different, how do you help them maintain a sense of fairness? I mean, that seems to be a big topic these days. How do you help them feel that they are being treated equitably and fairly if you're treating them differently?
Well, that's a good question. I think what I've found is, let me give you a little bit of an example, sort of an
Sure.
example. Um, People, let's say you have a couple of managers, say in terms of this question, you've got a couple of managers, and you want to be fair and all, but you're treating them differently. For one, sometimes they come to me and say, "Hey, why is X person getting to do this and I'm not?"
Hmm.
That makes it easy for me because then I can just address the question and say, "Hey, Jason, Matt, these are real life people, but Matt's a lot more experienced in this area. He's done this at XYZ companies. He, I'm giving him a little bit more leeway because he's got the experience in there and he's shown me that he can do it. You're brand new to it. I'm more involved in what you're doing. I'm more, certainly more available and more involved than I want to be longer term, but you just don't have the experience or the know-how, and I want to position you to be successful. Because that's part of it too. I don't want to bring them in and that everybody's excited. They got a Jason got a promotion. Well, then what is it that we have to do to make sure that proves to be successful, that it works out?
Hmm.
It's generally not good to be demoting people or moving people back. And there are times when it should be done, and people try their best to avoid it. But you want to put them in a position to succeed.
Hmm.
And for different people need different types of help to make that happen.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So let's switch directions here for a moment. Um, if you were to separate your life into the personal, social, um, and professional arenas, let's say three different arenas. We've spent all of this time so far talking about the professional arena.
Right.
Um, what when you think about leadership in the personal and social arenas, um, how does leadership look to you in those areas of your life?
Well, I would say in those areas, in most cases, people want to be led. I don't see, I see plenty of situations where it's not like a whole group of people are raising their hands saying, "Put this on me. I want to take charge." So I like to say, of course, lead by example and, you know, um, show them what needs to be done.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, I'm trying to think some examples here. Um, well, here's a sort of a silly example. So at one point, I was selected for jury duty. So
Okay.
think of that as kind of the non-professional, sort of the social side of things. I'm selected for jury duty, and so at one point, you get around the jury's, sitting around talking. They need to elect a jury foreman.
Hmm.
So a little bit of the backstory is I wanted to be it, but that's sort of beside the point here. And all it took was for somebody to stand up and not to say, "Hey, I want to be the jury foreman," but to start taking charge of things. "Hey,
Hmm.
we need to look at this. This is what the judges ask us to do. We're supposed to, as part of this, elect a foreman. How do we want to go about that?" So by setting the table, guess what? When we said, "Who wants to be foreman?" The answer was, "Why don't you do it? You seem like you're a capable guy."
Hmm.
Why don't you do it? So my point is, if you in leading by example is if you show people what you're capable of, a lot of times they're looking for somebody to lead things. People are busy.
Hmm.
People don't always have the inclination to be a leader or the time. And when they see somebody they think is capable, a lot of times of course, not all the time, but a lot of times they're saying, good, handle it. You got it.
Hmm.
So I try to lead by example on that, try to step up, in those personal and social situations, even on the family side. I mean, I don't want to go into the details, but suffice to say that my parents are getting older, a lot of issues with them, a lot of things to accomplish there. And the other family members were more than happy to let me handle it.
Hmm.
So to me, again, that's leading by example, that's stepping up, that's handling things. And believe me when I say, if anybody wanted to take it from me, wanted their turn, I'd be happy to let that happen. But
Hmm.
I don't see that socially or in the family, really.
Yeah. You're also talking about one additional thing, and that is a willingness to step forward when people are looking to you for some kind of leadership. There's nothing that says you have to step forward and take on that mantle. But from what you're saying, that is a part of who you are and how you have led in areas outside of your professional life, that in your personal or family life. So that
Yeah.
willingness to step forward.
Yeah, and you have to be careful not to overextend yourself. I mean, you really need to say, hey, if I'm going to sign up for this, do I have the bandwidth? Do
Hmm.
am I going to be able to do this successfully? Do I need to get others involved, or just to say, hey, I just can't do this one. I mean, that could happen to me right now with everything I have going on personally. Something could surface,
Hmm.
a consulting opportunity could surface or something like that, where I might have to say, timing's just not right. So you got to be self-aware on what you're capable of handling, adding to your plate, and achieving what you want to achieve. You don't get a lot of credit just for saying yes to a lot of things and not doing them.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah, I think the point that you just made about self-awareness is so important at any level of leadership. That ability to be aware of where you are in this particular moment, what your capacities are, what your willingness is. Um, but it takes somebody who's reasonably aware of themselves and what's going on in their own lives to be able to do that.
I think so, and it's true in the business world also. I mean, most people don't refuse promotions. Most people don't refuse additional responsibility. They all say yes, and that's okay. I get it. But what I'd like to see at times is for them to say yes, but in thinking about this, these are the areas where I'll need support when
Hmm.
I take this on for it to be successful. Not just, yeah, no problem. People want to be pleasers in general. People want to say yes, especially if they think it's going to help a career. But if you say yes, I say right away as part of that, say, am I going to have the resources? Am I going to have, to my boss, your support in this? Because we want it to be a success. This is what I'm going to need. Am I going to have it? And you present it in a positive way, of course, professional way.
Yes.
But don't just say yeah all the time. You can end up in over your head real fast.
Hmm. So you just brought up a really good point. I wanted to make sure we wove into this conversation, and that is resources. When you think about the resources that you've tapped into over the years to help you develop your own skills, whether those are individuals, experiences, books, whatever, what have you tapped into? What resources have you tapped into that you feel have been helpful for you?
I would say this. I mentioned with regard to Dennis that he has a following. So
Hmm.
if he decided to go run a company tomorrow, he'd be on the phone calling people and saying, I'm going to need this. Are you interested? You know, and that worked for me in my career as well, not as much in the area of recruiting people into a business, but for instance, I went to my last company and they wanted to start doing big business in Mexico.
Hmm.
Well, I had set that up for another company. So in a short period of time, I'm drawing on, I'm on the phone, calling my customs broker, calling UPS, calling warehousing people that I know, and saying we need to get something set up. Of course, everybody wants things done quickly. There's
Hmm.
no arguing that. And so tapping into people that I've met and worked with over the years that I've been successful with, I'd be crazy not to go back to those people and back to those businesses and at least talk to them about, do you want to join me in this new venture?
Hmm.
So I think that's a critical part of it. You mentioned books and so on. Um, I have, I'm a pretty big sports fan. So some of the books that I read are by people who have some relationship to sports. Tony Dungy's books I've found to be helpful. Haven't read them for a number of years, but they made an impression on me.
Hmm.
Dean Smith, and a book written not by but regarding Vince Lombardi. I got a number of those, and of course, Seven Habits, Living the Seven Habits, those kinds of books find all to be valuable.
Hmm.
Um, if when you're reading them, the filter I try to put on it is, I'm reading it for the interest and reading their philosophies, but try to put on the filter of how does it apply to me, and how can I take some kernel of it at least and implement it in what I'm doing because I like the result they got and I think it can help me. So that's really the goal, right?
Yes.
To do something that in either your personal life or business or your church or socially, that you can maybe think of things differently than you have, and attack them a little bit differently, get a different perspective. So that's what I've gotten out of books like that over the years.
Well, yeah, that's a really good listing of sort of a full spectrum of resources, everything from human resources all the way up through different kinds of reading resources. So one last thing I wanted to touch on before we finish up, and that is the leadership needs of today. If you had one message that you could pass on to leaders who are coming up, perhaps leaders who are listening to this podcast, what is it that you would want to pass on to them?
I'll use a real life example, Tom, to try to answer that question as best I can. And this concerns the last company that I worked with for a couple of years. And it's good company. It's good product, good company.
Hmm.
The senior leader is intelligent, smart guy. What they lack is commitment on the part of the senior execs. And I don't mean they don't do a good job when they're there. I mean they don't stay. They don't stick around.
Okay.
And as I look into that, so why don't they stick around? Well, more and more, everybody's looking for, that those stock options they've earned over the years to actually be worth something, or some sort of liquidity event, some go public, get acquired,
Hmm.
acquire somebody. They're looking for more than their salary and bonus. They're looking, and there's nothing wrong with that. My point on it is, in this company, they learn pretty quickly that's not happening. This is a company with a founder mentality. So the guy in charge started it from a little tiny company and has had great people work with him at times over the
Hmm.
years. But and I think these senior execs, I mean, I knew coming in that I wasn't being offered, stock, because there isn't stock. I mean, I knew all that, and I'm at a different stage in my career, and I was just looking to come in and do something fairly impactful for a period of time.
Hmm.
But I think what happens with the people that are on the team, and within the 2 years I was there, or shortly thereafter, virtually every senior exec was changed out, and this founder owns 50+% of the company anyway. So, and he's content with where he is. He has no intention of going public or anything. So what happens is these people lose interest. They don't
Hmm.
have the commitment to stick it out over the longer haul. And that's where, the company that I was with Dennis, where we went public, we went to the stock exchange, we got acquired, we did all these things. They were able to keep that team together. The company that bought us, a lot of times we'll start, of course, cutting heads, especially at the upper levels.
Hmm.
They didn't, and people wanted to stick around at that company. This other company, yeah, the pay and salary and benefits are good, but they don't see that event coming along, and they leave. At least in
Hmm.
my uh, in my belief. And these are not in general firings. These are, you know, our the CFO found a better thing, he's gone.
Hmm.
The COO found a better thing, he's gone. So I might have taken your question a little bit of off track, but I think one of the things that's lacking, and it can be on the part of the person or the business strategy, is just the commitment for the long haul. It's people want short term home run gratification that for most people never really happens. I know I'm extremely fortunate to have been acquired and to have been gone public and all these cool things that happen. And those are once in a career, or maybe zero times in a career types of things.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
it's interesting you mentioned that commitment to your people, because as we look at the average length of time that the American worker stays in a position, our parents,
right.
10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years in the same company, moving up perhaps, through some of the ranks, but a real commitment to a company. And the reverse was true, which is the companies had a strong commitment to the employees
Right.
to provide a working environment where people would want to stay and to grow within the company. And as we look now at the average length of stay in a particular company, it may be as short as 4 or 5 years. The average worker nowadays is looking at probably having 6, 7, 8 different companies that they're going to work with throughout the extent of their career.
Yeah,
And
I
so
mean,
that whole thing
exactly.
about commitment is a really interesting one that you touch on it.
Yeah, and I don't want to express it the wrong way. I mean, they're committed while they're there,
Hmm.
but and that's really what the value. That's really what the proposition is, right? And if somebody brings you on board, they're paying you for what you're going to do for them during that time. And if you leave, or they let you, they're not committed to paying you for the future. They're paying you for to come in and do a job. So
Hmm.
I get that. But I think a company could, and I'm sort of old school in this regard. I'm getting near the end of my career, and I've had 3 jobs. I mean, really, if you look at it,
Hmm.
ranging from 9 to 12 years. And when we used to interview people, it would be, oh, that person jumps around a lot. They haven't every 2 years, every now nobody cares about that.
Hmm.
It's changing. So either change with it, or get run over, I guess. But yeah.
Well, those are all really good points. Any parting words you want to give to the listeners of this podcast about leadership?
Oh, I think just one that Dennis also said a lot, that I don't think I brought up earlier. If I did, apologize. But you know, some people could view him as like, not a tough guy. He's really not a tough guy, but he would say I think it's an Emerson quote or whatever. He'd say, "Your actions speak so loudly, I can't hear what you're saying." And I think that's that's the thing, especially as a new manager. Don't get taken in by the rhetoric or what somebody has to say. Really examine what they're doing, and so you can do all the things we talked about. Make fact-based decisions.
Hmm.
Know who you want to see promotable. Know what you have to do to help them along in their careers. Don't just sign on to hearing their spiel. You know, examine things closely. And, like I said, your actions speak so loudly, I can't hear what you're saying. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to do this. It's
Thank you. It was fun.
Yeah, good. I'm glad. That's one of the goals of this podcast is to bring, hopefully anyway, to bring um, different viewpoints on leadership to anybody who's interested in learning more about it. And
Hmm.
so I really want to thank you again. I appreciate
Welcome.
your time and expertise. So thank
All
you.
right. Good talking with you, Tom. Thank you.
Yep, you too.
Bye. Bye.